75 years since India's independence, and India is among the world's leading digital economies, well on its way to the $1 trillion mark. To help achieve this potential and reach this lofty goal, it is imperative for every individual and organization to embrace digital. Joining us today are Dr. V. Anantha Nageswaran, Chief Economic Advisor, Government of India, and Mr. Chetan Krishnaswamy, Vice President, Public Policy, Amazon India, to elaborate on how to drive this next wave of growth.
Hi folks, it's a great honor to have Dr. Anantha Nageswaran, the Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India, with us for this fireside chat. Welcome, sir. And thank you for accepting the invitation to be part of Amazon Sambhav 2022. Dr. Nageswaran is a multifaceted person and one of those rare individuals who's had significant experience in industry, academia, and in the government. Even prior to taking up his role as the Chief Economic Advisor this January, he's been working with the government as a member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council while also serving on the board of several companies. Over the years, he has been associated with numerous prominent business schools across the globe. Before this, he's had a successful corporate career spanning over 17 years in the financial sector. It's indeed my privilege to have him with us today.
Thank you.
Just to kickstart our conversation, with most economies reopened and tourism resuming, concern has largely shifted from the economic impact of the pandemic to the economic impact of Russia's war in Ukraine. As energy and commodity prices soar, rising inflation is a concern around the world. What is the impact you see on India?
Chetan, that's a very important and comprehensive question. You are right that as the Omicron wave came and went without causing much of a disruption in India, and I think largely elsewhere as well, with the recent exception of China, the feeling was that global economies would continue their recovery from the previous year 2021 and in fact build on it, gain further momentum, etc. But obviously within a month of Omicron variant being in the news, we had the Russia-Ukraine conflict, which broke out towards the end of February. So the repercussions and the ramifications of it are still kind of filtering through. In fact, we may not have even seen all of it yet because the impact on financial markets and cross-border flows of funds is actually only now beginning to happen. But it's already had an impact on the price of crude oil. As you know very well, we import more than 80% of our crude from overseas, and to that extent, it naturally raises our trade deficit, raises our current account deficit, but more importantly, it raises input costs for all businesses and also for households. The consumption of petrol and diesel is essential, and to that extent, therefore, it reduces their disposable income for other spending. That's one part of it. The other part of it is that because hydrocarbons are a feedstock for manufacture of fertilizer prices have begun to shoot up as well, and some countries have begun to hoard the fertilizers that they have and imposed bans on fertilizer exports from their countries as well. So that has contributed directly to a rise in subsidy that the Government of India gives to farmers on fertilizer prices. Then, of course, in spite of the inflation impact that the rising price of oil and fertilizer, also food, because Russia and Ukraine are big wheat exporters. While inflation is one aspect of it, food security is another aspect. Thankfully, in India, we are relatively far more comfortably placed than others. But there are several countries where the availability of food is more important than even the price. They may be able to get some financial assistance from international organizations, etc., and be able to pay for it. But the question is, are they available? Because exports are restricted due to sanctions, and seeing that other countries develop a sense of scarcity and hoard what they have. So I think the food availability and food security is going to emerge as a much bigger challenge for several low-income countries around the world. So these are all the various, and my list is not exhaustive, various ramifications of the Ukraine conflict. But there I would say that compared to other nations, even among advanced countries, I think India is relatively better placed for the simple reason that India paid a certain price, not a big one, a certain price last decade because we had banking system stresses, which was then compounded by stress in the non-banking financial sector towards 2018. And then we also had Indian corporates trimming their balance sheets and getting their financial health in good shape, etc. So we are entering into this decade and this conflict in a way with a much better financial system and a much robust corporate financial health. So that gives us a lot of cushion. And the Reserve Bank of India has ample foreign exchange reserves, and with its recent monetary policy move, it has also signaled its determination to combat the inflationary pressures, which is a good thing. It's good for central bank credibility. And as far as the budget is concerned, the government of India did three things in the last 3 years, and more so in this budget as well, which is that the budget is based on very credible assumptions, both with respect to nominal economic growth and the revenue growth assumptions. And then there is a certain conservatism inbuilt in that. And budget numbers have become more transparent. What you see is what you get. There is nothing below the budget. There is no sort of hiding away the government's expenditure in public sector enterprises so that the government's market borrowing looks smaller. It is not that. So when people comment on, for example, India's market borrowing being much higher, it is simply because the government of India isn't trying to hide it in the public sector enterprises' balance sheets. It's now on the government's books. That is the second part. The third part is seeing that public households are going to be relatively cautious coming out of the Omicron or the COVID mindset to increase their spending. And then corporates will be watching households increasing their spending before they commit capital expenditure. The government has taken it upon itself to drive the capital expenditure. And it's here important to note that in 21-22, the revised estimates for capital expenditure are even higher than the budget estimates, showing that the government of India has been able to execute its capital expenditure plans made initially in February 2021 even better than what it had envisaged. So it is on back of this that the government of India has increased the capex spending for 22-23 to 7.5 lakh crores, and then you add in the public enterprises spending their own capex, state governments being given a 1 lakh crore 50-year interest-free loan. So net-net, we are targeting something like 10.5 to 11 lakh crores of capex in the whole country. That gives us a certain growth cushion as well. And the Reserve Bank of India is now projecting 7.2% for India's GDP growth. The IMF is projecting 8.2% growth. Probably the reality will fall somewhere in between. Whether it falls closer to 8 or closer to 7 would depend on the length and the length of the conflict, the length of period for which the high oil prices rule, and also the peak levels. One silver lining for oil price in particular, considering the monetary policy tightening that is happening now in the developed world and considering the lockdown and the economic slowdown in China, is that it is dampening the demand for crude oil. So on the one hand, we have supply disruptions, but it is being offset by lower demand. So that's actually in a way not a bad thing from the Indian point of view, this restraint on the crude oil price. So all told, I think it is going to be obviously a volatile and a turbulent year with a lot of uncertainties. India will not be exempt from that. But I think in the global committee of nations, and relatively speaking, India is better placed to handle the fallout. Because as I told you earlier, we paid our growth dues last decade, and we are entering this period with a fairly reasonably comfortable degree of macroeconomic and policy stability.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. And, that's fascinating exposition, and the optimism, the ring of optimism there, cannot be sort of missed.
Well, I would put it as, I would say, it's maybe cliched, but I would say it is cautious and you're optimistic. It's both.
Oh, absolutely. India also appears to be on an FTA signing spree in a bid to diversify its export portfolio. Several of these FTAs contain chapters dedicated to digital trade. What role can the e-commerce sector play to facilitate digital trade and exports?
No, let me sort of take this question in two parts. Yes, you are right that the government of India is showing enthusiasm and commitment to conclude free trade agreements. First thing we should note is that as a country that has a trade deficit, by and large, with many of its trading partners, India will naturally have more duty concessions to give away in any trade negotiation. That's just a given, because you are the one who has more imports and you have an average import duty which is higher than the other partner with whom you are negotiating. Therefore, what you give away is going to be slightly more. But that's a sort of a short-term view. But what it does is, it lowers the imported landed cost of the products that we import, whether it is primary goods or intermediate goods. So to that extent, when those goods go into the manufacture of final products in our country, whether it is meant for industrial use or household use, that will lower the overall cost of production. So it does boost medium-term competitiveness. So it will be somewhat incorrect to look for immediate benefits in terms of exports. Because when you conclude a free trade agreement, what happens is those countries which already have very low duty, and when they grant zero duty access for Indian products, we must remember that because they are a low duty country, they already have given zero duty access to many of the other trading partners. All that it does is to level the playing field for Indian products. Now you have to compete on other dimensions. So that's the part with respect to the free trade agreements, and we are negotiating with other countries as well, besides the two we have just concluded with the UAE and with Australia. Now, as far as digital trade is concerned, we need to look at commerce in general. The digital trade or e-commerce is just a manner or method of conducting commerce. Naturally, it makes it relatively easier to reach many far-flung parts of the world. And also for many businesses, even if they are not scale-based, I think the most important contribution that e-commerce does is to take away the scale as an impediment. No matter how small you are, no matter how remotely located you are able to participate and be able to access a global market. So I think we have barely scratched the surface of that. And to the extent that these micro, small and medium enterprises come on digital platforms or e-commerce platforms, and more importantly, the potential of these free trade agreements is shared with them. They need to be informed, they need to be educated so that they can take advantage of the zero duty access they have. Then I think over time, and this will take time to build, let's not be under any illusion that it's going to happen overnight, because in general for India itself, exports will take a long time to react to the free trade agreements. Initial reaction will be seen in the higher imports. That is okay, that's nothing wrong about it. But over time, Indian products will gain better access as they learn how to compete with other countries. And that is where I think the micro, small and medium enterprises will benefit immensely from the access to digital and e-commerce platform. Therefore, as India signs free trade agreements, I feel that digitally traded goods and e-commerce platforms will have a very big role to play in taking advantage of them and boosting our overall exports in the years ahead.
Sure. No, absolutely. And that brings us to this question around the open network for digital commerce, which is essentially intended to democratize e-commerce. And a pilot program is currently underway. And Amazon is very closely engaged with the ONDC team. And we are quite fascinated with the thought process there. How do you see ONDC evolving over a period of time? And can also India come up with a unique e-commerce model with a sort of a win-win situation for both online as well as offline sellers?
Absolutely. I think your question contains the sort of the elements of the answer that I was going to give. Personally, I am very excited by this development. And In a way, as a public policy person also, I see this as India sort of playing a pioneering role in creating an open network. In fact, I would even call open network digital commerce. I would call it open network democratic commerce, so that ONDC could be applied in both ways. And it is consistent with what we have done in general with the public digital goods, our payments platform, etc. See, in the advanced world, much of these are developed on the basis of private sector initiatives, but that also gives them the opportunity to erect entry barriers and raise costs for others, obviously to the advantage of their own bottom line, which is fine. That is how the marketplace works. But in a country which is a low-income country or aspiring to be a middle-income country in the next decade or so, we need to make sure that we provide access to all citizens to participate in the technology advancement. And that is what we have done earlier with the mobile phones, one of the lowest tariffs in the world. And then we did that with the public digital goods and the payment gateways, which now even for 1 rupee, you can actually use your digital payments. And this one also democratizes the e-commerce platforms. And as you said, it blends both brick and mortar businesses and small businesses. I am very excited by the potential it holds. I think just as we are seeing that UPI is now being adopted by other countries, I do envisage that this ONDC will become the global benchmark in the years ahead, as it basically, because the developed world got to where it is today on the back of the micro, small and medium enterprises in their economies. And it is not enough to kind of romanticize MSMEs, because when you romanticize them, you end up keeping them where they are. But if you really believe in them, their potential to transform the economy, then you have to provide them opportunities to grow out of their humble beginnings. And platforms like ONDC provide exactly that kind of opportunity. And more than that, it also means that they will not feel threatened by technology. They will not see this as an either or as a mutually exclusive phenomena. If they can participate and gain from it, then they will be one of the most welcoming adopters and patrons of new technology. So in multiple ways, I see this as revolutionizing India's hinterland, revolutionizing India's MSME sector, e-commerce, and then eventually down the road, making a transformation in the lives of many other developing nations. So I'm very excited by that.
Switching to the Prime Minister's grand vision of creating a digitally inclusive India, we have over 500 million internet users in the country today, and the numbers are growing at a phenomenal pace. What, according to you, should be the key areas of focus for the government in creating a more vibrant economy in keeping with a more vibrant digital economy in keeping with the times?
I mean, like we discussed in response to your earlier question, Chetan, whether it is with respect to digital payment gateways or the ONDC, the government is actually systematically developing the digital ecosystem in the country in multiple dimensions. And crises like the pandemic have also ended up being opportunities for early adoption and for widespread adoption, etc. So I think already the groundwork has been pretty strongly laid by this government for developing and expanding the digital ecosystem in the country. But naturally, it's a work in progress. And the key thing, as we all of us become comfortable with using digital platforms for our payments, for our purchase of goods and services, security becomes the most important thing. And privacy becomes the second most important thing. And the third, I would say, is also the infrastructure, the communication network and the access that we need to have, and also to making sure that any of these, and that is not just confined to digital commerce or digital platforms, it's in general that you do not want to allow the marketplace to be captured by a few players. Right. I mean, if you want to talk about perfect competition, one of the elements of perfect competition is to have a large number of buyers and sellers. What digital commerce platforms do is to actually enable both. And that is why it is very important that we are developing the public platform And it's the foundation on which then the private sector builds the commerce and the households and consumers participate. So that's a great model because it prevents concentration, it prevents oligopoly, it prevents supernormal profit generation, and it provides an opportunity for both consumers and businesses. Therefore, whatever we have been doing on the digital ecosystem development is very sound and very advanced. And we just need to keep at it as long as we sort of make sure that not only we put in place the legal and regulatory framework for security, data security, for privacy, and also for a level playing field, but more importantly, given that technology evolves rapidly, our regulatory responses also have to keep evolving. And these are the ingredients of a successful evolution of a digital ecosystem in the country.
Time and again, the Prime Minister has called startups the backbone of the Indian economy and the key to realizing an Atmanirbhar Bharat, or a self-reliant India. Out of the 100 unicorns, only a handful seem to be making profits. Many see this as a bubble that will explode. How can India really spawn and nurture this ecosystem?
Right. So, I mean, it's a very good question, Chetan. But we need to separate our concerns about the bubble, which is naturally a concern with respect to the valuations in financial markets, and we need to separate that from the underlying real phenomena. Like take the case of the TMT boom in the late 1990s, or for that matter, the internet boom. Yes, it did lead to bubbles in TMT stocks. It led to bubble in internet stocks. We had NASDAQ composite index in the US collapse from 5,300 to, I think if I'm not mistaken, less than 1,000 points back in 2000, 2002. But the underlying technology and the advancement that it created, that didn't die. That is what paved the way for the emergence of companies like yours, Amazon, etc. So I think the bubble part of it is a separate financial market exuberant phenomena, which can pop, which will pop. No bubble stays on forever. But the underlying entrepreneurial spirit that this bubble reflects, and the willingness of the public to adopt, embrace, and use them, that is not going to go away. That will continue. So he's right in calling the startup unicorns as a sign of a different India, a self-confident India that is emerging. And also, if you notice, these days, the startup ecosystem is not confined to urban educational institutions or urban residents or urban youth. Earlier, it used to be incubators, for example, used to be housed only in the IITs and the IIMs. Right. Now, many engineering colleges and many business schools across the country in B and C towns, etc., are now talking of incubators and creating a startup ecosystem. And there was a very good report, edited by, I think, one of the professors is Rohan Chinchwadkar from IIT Mumbai. I think they came up with a report on the India startup ecosystem. And what was very satisfying from a macro and a nation building point of view was that this culture and the mindset has diffused. So in that sense, bubble is something what we see in the financial markets, but the underlying ecosystem is definitely going to sustain and grow. So therefore, I don't see any contradiction between the two.
Thank you for taking the time to share your thoughts with us. It's been a pleasure to have you with us at this year's Amazon Sambhav. We truly value your perspectives and insights and have enjoyed listening to your lucid responses.
Thank you, Chetan. It was equally my pleasure to converse with you. And I'm very glad that this Sambhav event is going to reach, thanks to the digital presence, more people than who would be able to attend where it be only a physical event. And I'm also very happy to note the amount of contribution that Amazon is able to make to MSME businesses, onboarding them and giving them an opportunity to grow. It has been my pleasure to be part of this event. Thank you.
We'd also like to thank the audience for listening in, and we hope that you found it enriching. Thank you.
ये वादा है पक्का, प्रगति का